Hello there, this is Divya Mishra from Property Success Academy, and the reason I'm doing this short video is because the other day, quite often, we get emails from different people asking us questions about property, about joint ventures, let lots of different strategies, and we often reply to them emails. Now, what I realised the other day is when replying to them emails, I'm just replying to that one person, and not everybody's benefiting from that answer. So I thought we'd do two things. First, I thought I created a video with the answer to the question in. And second, before I created this video, I sent an email out to you to say, this person's asked this question, how would you answer it? And there was a prize for that, prize for the best answer. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to see what answers you came up with, and to see how you were thinking about joint ventures. And we had loads of entries. This video was supposed to go out yesterday, but we had so many entries that I just didn't have enough time to read through all of them to pick the best answer yesterday. So I've got around to it now, and I'm creating this video. So let's just get straight into it. So to make sure I hide the identity of the person who emailed us, because we don't necessarily want everybody to know that it was this particular person. I'm going to call him Mr. A because that stands for anonymous. So Mr. A. So Mr. A sent in this question to us. His question was, in the typical joint venture deal of 50-50 share, the armchair investor typically will put down a 25 to 30% cash deposit. I would come up with the deal, so Mr. A would come up with a deal and do the rest of the work on the property and remortgage the property in 6 to 12 months time to get the cash investors money or deposit back out of the property. So the question is, who would pay for the interest on the total loan, which is 75% of the purchase? So basically, who would pay for the mortgage on the property while the works are being done on the property, or who would pay for the interest on the property? Is it split half as per the share that you've got within the property, or should Mr. A pay all of it? If I pay them all, so pay it all, there will be a chance of the 50% rent not covering the repayment in the future when rates rise. So what he's saying here is, if he pays the full 75%, the loan, the mortgage payment on the full 75% of the loan that the bank's given him. So basically, if you borrowed £75,000 at a 6% interest rate, that's going to be £375 per calendar month that he's going to be that the interest only payment is going to be. So he's saying if he pays the full £375, his share of 50% of the rent is not going to cover that, because let's say the rent is £500 a month, his share of that, £250, is obviously not going to cover £375, and especially when obviously interest rates go up in the future, which we all know they're going to go up at some point in time. When, we're not sure exactly, but they will go up, because the Bank of England can't keep it at 0.5% forever. And then Mr. A goes on to say, I know there isn't a formula and it's down to negotiation. However, I wonder what you would consider to be fair. A fair way of doing this. So we sent this out to you guys, and we asked you to respond, had loads of entries, and I picked out the best answer. And in that email I also said the best answer will get a prize, and this prize is a brand new Keep Out of Jail for Free warning, the FCA new marketing laws for joint venture of 2014 and beyond DVD. So this is a DVD that we're just finishing off the creation of. It will be available by itself for £97 plus VAT. So what is it? This DVD is basically outlining the major changes that are happening in 2014 for people working with private joint venture partners, and this applies to everybody working with private joint venture partners. So if you're looking for private joint venture partners who are funding your deals, there's some critical changes that are happening, and we really want to let people know about this. Now, £97 plus VAT, it's going to be available for purchase at that price. Truth is, it's worth loads more than that, because if you don't follow these rules, you will end up in jail. And I've never been in jail, but I've heard from people it's not a nice place to be, and plus you can't do property deals when you're in jail. Who'd want to be in jail if it's going to affect the number of deals that you do? So there's some critical changes in the way you're allowed to market for joint venture partners. So when you stand up at, say, a networking event or do some social media activity, or however you attract joint venture partners, there are critical changes in the way that you are allowed to do that, and it's very specific. And in addition to that, not only are there critical ways in the changes in the laws for the way you market yourself, then once the person decides that, oh, this might be a good idea, there are changes in the way you have to process these people. There's some official changes in how you process these people through your system, through your nurturing process, to make sure that you're fair to them. Now, why did this all come out? Well, basically it came about because the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, formerly known as the FSA, the Financial Services Authority, decided that some joint venture partners who were putting money into deals were getting ripped off or weren't being treated fairly. Now, the chances are, when they came up with this information, it was probably a very small minority of people, like it always is, and they decided to crack a walnut with a sledgehammer, like they often do. But it's their way of keeping the masses of people safe, or what they think is safe. Either way, these laws are coming into play. Whether we agree with them or whether we don't, these laws are coming into play in 2014. And if you're looking for joint venture partners, if you're working with joint venture partners, you have to be aware of these laws. And so we created this DVD. So before 2014 what you need to do. And the winner, who I'm going to announce in a moment, is going to get this DVD as soon as it's created. It will be in the post in the next few weeks. And let's have a little bit of a drum roll. The winner is Munhir Javid. So, Munhir Javid, why did I pick him as a winner? Well, basically, this is his winning answer, and I just really love the way that he wrote this. The net rental profits would be shared 50-50. While the property is being refurbished or empty, there shall be a reserve account of at least 2 months' worth of rent. If the property is empty for long periods of time, the joint venture partner should help fund the interest costs on this, as this will incentivize them to relet the property quicker. So what Munhir is saying here, Mr. A, is that the net profit of the property, so the net profit is the profit after all of the costs, should be split 50-50. So that's when the property is rented out. Now, if you're going to refurb the property, obviously that's going to take a period of time. It might take a week, it might take a month. But if it's a light refurb, even if it's something that is going to take 2 weeks, a small light refurb, if you're starting out, it's good to allocate 2 months, because refurbs can almost always take longer and almost always cost more than you think they're gonna, because of minor little things that you may not have thought of at the beginning. So what he's saying here is you have 2 months reserved for all the cost, the outgoing running costs of that property, so mainly the mortgage and the insurance at this point in time, and that is a capital cost. So that's a cost that the actual joint venture partner puts in. They're aware of it, they fund that part of it, right, because that's when the refurb's happening. Then once the property is let out, within that 2 month period, the profit is split 50-50, the net profit split 50-50. If the property remains empty for longer than the 2 month period, then Mr. A, the one who's basically doing the work, should help fund the interest cost on the mortgage. So it's not just the cash investor who's funding the interest cost, it's Mr. A who's doing the deal, because that will incentivize them to let the property quicker. Obviously sometimes things happen, you can't let it quickly, but usually that's a case of either poor marketing or the wrong price, or the wrong the property's not done up well enough. And so then Munhir goes on to say that is why it would be better to take 50% of the profits instead of trying to pay for the interest on the mortgage and then taking your cut of the rent and kind of trying to figure it out that way. As a side note, I cannot see the Bank of England raising rates until there is a significant increase in property prices, and therefore you would have made good capital appreciation, significantly mitigated the increased cost of the loan payment. So what he's saying there, he doesn't think that the Bank of England will raise the interest rates for a while, the base rate, which is currently at 0.5%. You know, although what I'd say there is that nobody really knows when they're going to increase it. At the end of the day, it's their decision. We can do everything we can to try and predict it, but it is at the end of the day their decision. And there's lots of reports that have said they're not gonna, and there's some reports that said that they are going to increase it in the near future. And really, you can't predict that. But you can be safe to say they're not going to go from 0.5% to 5% next month, because that will be too big a jump. If they do increase it, they'll increase it in small increments to begin with, just to test out what's happening. So you're going to mitigate the increased cost of the loan there. So personally, he also then goes and say, in life, I think you should give as much as you can and take as little in return as you can. Feel comfortable with it. In other words, be as generous as you can with what you can give away. This will increase the number of investors as an experienced investor you'll want to work with. And as the silent or less experienced JV partner, you'll get the experienced investor more incentivized to make larger profits, as they will be getting a bit bigger share. So basically what he's saying there, just give. The more you give, the more you're going to get in return in ways that you don't know it's going to happen. So you're going to do more deals. And this comes back to our model, our SOI model, which is speed of implementation. It's so important. The speed at which you implement is more important than the amount of money you're going to make out the deal, because the amount of money you make out the deal, once you made it and you spent it on something, it's gone. The speed at which you do the deal defines how quickly you can do the next deal, and it also defines the level of experience you get in a shorter space of time. If I do 10 deals in 1 month, I will get the same amount of experience as if I spread that 10 deals over 10 years, right? But you're condensing the experience, you're making the mistakes quicker, and you're learning from them quicker. Now, I wouldn't advise doing 10 deals in 1 month, because that's an incredible number of deals in 1 month, and you'll literally be flat out. But what we are saying here is do the deals as quick as possible, and don't worry about, you know, making that extra few percent here. Cutting the cost down as much as possible, obviously keeping an eye on your cost, but don't worry about, you know, if the joint venture partner wants an extra 5%, then go for it, give it to them, you know, because you're going to do more deals quicker than trying to take that extra 5%. Have your boundaries though, make sure you know your boundaries. So what do we think? What's our answer to that question? So again, the question was, the joint venture partner will put 25 to 30% deposit in. Mr. A will do all the work and then remortgage in 6 to 12 months time. So first of all, is there a typical way of doing this type of deal? The answer to that is no. There is no typical way of doing any kind of deal, especially if the deal was creative. And we do a lot of creative deals. In fact, that's what we specialize in, is creative transactions, whether that's with a joint venture partner or an installment contract or a lease option or a let-to-let or whatever it is, you know, a refurb. We specialize in doing creative deals. And the truth is, in a creative deal, it's like going with a blank canvas. With a JV partner, it's like going with a blank canvas. There is no typical type of deal. I can, however, tell you the type of deals that we do. Now, this doesn't mean you have to do it like this. All it means is this is just how we do it. This is our experience, and lots of people will tell you lots of different ways of doing it. What we typically do is almost exactly what Munhir explained. Well, pretty much exactly what Munhir explained. Is the joint venture partner will fund the purchase of the property. They'll put the deposit in. They'll put the as the upfront cost. They will fund however many months that property is going to be empty for as the upfront cost. They'll fund the solicitor's cost. They'll also fund the cost of the insurance for the time it's empty. They'll fund the refurb costs. So all the upfront costs involved until the point in time which we think the property will be ready to let out, they will fund that period. Okay, and that's the upfront cost to the investor. And then when we can refinance, we will refinance. Now, typically in the deals that we do, we don't tend to refinance within 6 to 12 months. We tend to leave that joint venture partner's money in the deal. If we can refinance, we will, but we don't focus on that, because at the end of the day, you got to find a heavily discounted property to be able to refinance that money out. And there's a lot of mortgages that refinance mortgages which have been come out at £10,000 more than you bought the property for, and it doesn't always work, really, to be honest. It doesn't always work, and in our experience it's better to leave the money in, keep the monthly payments down as well by doing so, because obviously if you increase the mortgage then the monthly payments go up. Then once the property is let out, that is when you'll split the profit 50-50, the net profit after all costs, with a joint venture partner. Now what we do, or one thing that you can do, is that you can also take out a percentage of that net income, so obviously a percentage of your rent, and put it into a separate account every single month. Because with a newly refurbed property, the chances of there being maintenance are relatively low compared to an old property, so you're going to have less maintenance. However, when the property gets older, obviously you'll have some level of maintenance. So if you put a small allocated amount aside, even if it's just £25 or £20 a month, into a separate account, you will build up a fund over a period of time that when you do have maintenance, it does not hit your cash flow. You just take it out of that fund. Right, so it's important to have a fund there, and usually 1 month's rent is usually enough to cover most kind of incidents. Every so often you're going to have to replace the boiler and refurb the whole property, etc. And you can also factor that in as well. Major refurb every 10 years roughly on average. You'll probably need to do a major refurb of everything in the property if it's a rental property. And yes, okay, so going back to the model that Mr. A talked about, if you're going to pay the interest on that loan, that joint venture partner put the money in, you're going to pay the interest on the loan out of your 50% of the rental income. So say the interest on the loan is £300, your 50% is £250. Well, you're not going to make any money. That's it. You're not going to make money, and the joint venture partner is going to make money. So it doesn't make any sense. It's not balanced. It's not a balanced level of risk and reward there. You need to have a balance. And the other thing is, when you mention that model, you need to be really, really clear to begin with what is the definition of a lender versus a joint venture partner. Okay, so what a joint venture partner is not, is that they are not somebody who puts money into a deal and gets a fixed return on their money. That's not a joint venture partner. That is a lender. That's somebody lending you the money, right? If they get a fixed return no matter what happens, they are lending you the money. A joint venture partner, our definition of a joint venture partner is the joint pursuit of profit from property by two or more parties. So let's just break that down. The joint pursuit. So you are doing this together, which means that if you're doing something together, you share the risk and you share the reward of profit from property, which means that if you use a model where you are paying the interest on the loan and you're only getting 50% of the rent, which doesn't cost cover the interest, you are not in profit. So that's not a profitable model. So the joint pursuit of profit from property by two or more parties. So there's two or more of you involved. So that's our definition of a joint venture partner. So there's equal risk and equal reward. Now obviously if you're putting the work in, they're putting the money in, 50-50 we think is can be a fair split. And you did ask the question, what is fair? What is a fair split? And really, at the end of the day, fair comes down to your own opinion. Now Mun here said, you got to give as much as possible. You do, but you do also have to have a balance, and you are the only person who can decide what that balance is. If you're starting out and you have no experience and no money, the joint venture partner might say, okay, well give me 70% of the deal, 75% of the profit, you keep 25%, and that might work for you at that point in time because you're inexperienced. Okay, you've not done anything in property. They might be giving you a good credit facility and a good level of experience from their end, and a lot more. They might be offering a lot more from their end. And in that case, if you take 25% cut, you do all the work, but they're there to kind of brush off of their experience, etc., and their money. Then that's fair, right? But if you're very, very, very experienced and you're joint venturing, then 25% of the deal probably isn't fair. Depends on the deal. You know, if it's just two of you in the deal and you take 25%, they literally put the money, that's probably not fair. And to be honest, the most experienced people I know in the property market usually borrow the money as opposed to joint venture on the money. However, that comes with a different level of risk. So you need to be happy to take that other level of risk, because if something goes not how you want it to, you still got to pay the joint venture partner back, and you got to have provisions to be able to do that if you can't refinance, etc. So that's why we do, we say to people, do joint ventures, because you're liable for 50% and the joint venture partner is liable for 50%, and they should have done their research and you need to do your research. So what's fair? Well, it depends on your level of experience. We generally do 50-50 split down the middle of cash flow and equity on the properties. Now there's one last thing to know on this, Mr. A, is that you mentioned that the rent, half, the 50% of the rent might not cover the interest payment when the interest rate goes up. And to be frank, if you're doing deals where all you're making is £100 a month with a joint venture partner involved, so £50 a month each, well, to be frank, that's not a very profitable deal for either of you, because you're going to put a lot of work into it and get £50 a month, and most of that work is going to be up front. So you got to make sure the deal makes enough money, because if you're making overall net £100 a month and the interest rates are low right now, when they go up by a couple of percent, you are going to be negative overall. And that doesn't really make sense, because one of the key rules in property is the property's got a cash flow. It's got a cash flow, and it's got to be stress tested so that when interest rates do go up, it still cash flows. You don't want it to not cash flow when interest rates go up. You want to make sure it cash flows, and the equity comes second, because the equity, you cannot get the equity out of the property until you sell the property or refinance it. There's nothing you can do to get that equity. So you may as well just understand that it's there and that you can't get hold of it, so we gotta focus on cash flow. Obviously, unless you're flipping the property, but in this case we're renting it out, so focus on the cash flow. You need to be netting like £300 a month or more, really, to make it worth your while and worth a joint venture partner as well. So just make sure that the deal works for you, and I hope this has been a massive use. We're looking at doing more videos like this to answer questions that people ask us, so you can get the full benefit of the answers that we give to that person. Everybody can benefit. I hope you enjoyed the video. My name is Divya Mistry, and that's my business partner Saj Hussain. We are Property Success Academy. Thank you for watching this video.